Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the iOS 3D Essentials podcast. Here we discuss the strategies in your journey to become a complete senior iOS developer. My name is Bogdan. I'm a senior iOS developer and lead instructor in the iOS 3D Essentials program, the online training program for iOS developers who want to become complete senior developers. Today, our special guest is Mohammad, or Mo, from Iran, now living in the Netherlands. He's a senior iOS developer and student of the iOS 3 Essentials program. So, hi, Mo, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Bogdan. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Same. Thanks for joining. So, I want to hear more about your story, about what you achieved as an engineer. So, can you share with us like a summary of your achievements with the program that we can dig into today?
Yeah, sure. So I am an iOS developer for almost 7 years, and I have started my journey as a very freelance iOS developer, then progressed through my career becoming developer for some different companies. 2 years ago, I moved to Netherlands, and from then I am working still in the field of being an iOS developer. So the couple of things that I was struggling through this career was the lack of knowledge. So the change of this program was very huge for me, and the impact of it was very big for me because before that I was struggling with lack of knowledge, knowing about different principles, software principles, architectures, design patterns. And I just read these concepts and titles in like books and titles, but I have never tried to have a hands-on experience with it. And I was looking for a program to explore this and to teach me how, for example, these things are applicable in the real world projects. So in
Mhm.
this program, I learned a lot about these things.
Awesome. So, congratulations on your achievement that you mentioned, and I'm sure we'll find more during the conversation because it's hard to quantify everything like in a short
Yes,
summary. But
yes, correct.
yeah, congrats. And for you watching this podcast, just stay until the end to learn how Mo did it, and you can achieve it too. Our goal is to find replicable steps that others can follow to achieve the same. So, okay, Mo, I'm curious, as always, to start with your background so I can understand better where you're coming from. So, how'd you start with iOS development, and how long have you been in this field so far?
Yeah, so I started 7 years ago. I was more into an Apple geek, and at that time, I was helping friends and families with fixing their Apple devices. But as I had a software engineering background at the university, I become interested in iOS development because at that time I remember Apple introduced the Swift language and it was pretty new and it was totally different from Objective-C because I remember I have tried Objective-C for a couple of times, but then I couldn't just come up with it and I just put it away. But then with Swift 1, I become interested again in Apple development and I started learning about it and becoming like a freelance developer in Iran. After a couple of months, I heard into a company that they needed a nice developer, so I started learning more and more about this field. But still, at that time, there was a lack of enough documentation for Swift as well. So I just learned through practicing and learning from different sources until I became more advanced or more meteor developer into the journey. 2 years ago, I was struggling to find a job for moving to another company because I remember at the time I wasn't getting paid very well in Iran, and I was also comparing my salary with other software engineers, specifically iOS developers around the globe, and I was noticing that there's a huge difference between it because I had the experience, I had the knowledge, but I didn't pay very well. So that at that time, I was looking for a better job, but there was something missing. So I remember at that time I was able to pass some stages of the interviews, but for the technical part, I was struggling, and I noticed that something is off with my knowledge here. There is a community of iOS developers in Iran, which we are all share our knowledge. And I remember one day they shared one of the crash courses of the Mike and Caio in the channel, and I was just out of curiosity watching the video, and I noticed that this is very amazing because they started with a messy program, and they step by step refactor it into a very modular design with TDD, and it was very amazing that they did it with just like 2 or 3 crash courses. And at that time, I found that there's something missing here with my knowledge. So, but the issue was that in Iran, because we don't have any access to the international banking, these kind of things, I wasn't able to join the program because also I was getting paid very low, and the exchange rate for enrolling in the program was very high for me, and I had to save a lot of money for this program to be able to join it. I remember I passed the interviews with a Dutch company in Netherlands, and I moved here. And I remember the first thing that I did was to enroll in the program in the first couple of months of joining and coming to the Netherlands. And then I started slowly taking this course, and it took me, I think, a couple of months, 8 or 10 months, because I wasn't doing very actively. But I remember for some of the courses, I remember I was watching them 2 or 3 or 4 times to learn more, because every time that you watch it, you notice different levels of details that they are doing and different concepts. So for me, it was very good, and it was very interesting that, for example, I knew about clean architecture, or I knew about, for example, OOP or protocol-oriented programming, these kind of things. But I have never tried them in like their real project, like big project. So that was the time that I learned about all of this.
Awesome.
Uh,
Awesome. So can I
yeah,
summarize a bit what you told us so far? Because
yeah,
I
sure.
really like how you structured the information. So first of all, you started by just being passionate about Apple products and technologies and things like that, which is nice. And you also had a computer science background, and then at some point there was a cap on how much value and of course income you could get by working in Iran. And I think many people find that where there's a limit on how much you can actually earn in a country that doesn't do like first tier tech company possibility out there, right? So
Yes,
then the natural progression, especially with this global like global IT world and stuff like that, is to look abroad, like maybe in remote in your case, with an offer to with a relocation as well. And as you said, you had the knowledge maybe to compete to other developers in Europe and in the US, but because of the geographic factor, you could not have access to these positions and to these opportunities. So you could also not properly you didn't have a good chance to join the program, even though you found about it and you wanted to join, which is great. And I like the fact that as soon as you got to the Netherlands, you say, perfect, now's the time to start this journey. So awesome. And but I wanted to highlight especially this part where you understand that you must change something. And in your case, it was just moving to a different country if you want to achieve more, if you want to have access to better opportunities, to better positions, better compensation. Sometimes this is a requirement because it's very hard to convince a company, let's say like a Netherlands company, to pay you that money when you work from your home city, right? So
yeah,
it's just hard for them because it's difficult to validate your output, to keep in touch with the team, things like that. And that's why I saw companies from the Netherlands, for instance, in Romania too, where they offer people jobs, and they ask you to relocate, right? And they help you with that, but it's like, no, you gotta come here, because then you'll be super productive for us. So perfect. I think I captured that pretty nicely, and I like how you actually structured it, because it's like a an ongoing story. Like everything is connected. So thanks for sharing that. So now that we are on this path, or on your path as an engineer, so do you have like more longer term goals where you want to get to? Like what's next for you, at least from where you sit right now?
Yeah, for me, I the thing that I'm looking forward to is becoming a lead iOS engineer or lead software engineer in my career. And for that part, I still think that I need to gain more knowledge and to practice more the things that I have learned in the academy, especially the more complex one, because there are a couple of modules that different that cover different areas of principles and design patterns and these kind of things. So I still think that I have learned something, but I haven't maybe tried it very well. So I think that area needs a little bit more working, and also maybe I need to take some leadership skills as well to be able to also lead other people's to become like a senior iOS developer, just like the way I did.
Right, right. That's a very good point, because you to be a lead developer, you need technical skills, you need technical
Yeah,
excellence, but you also need other skills like soft skills and
yeah,
people skills that usually come harder, especially for us developers that are not used to interacting that much, and especially with the resources that you have access to. And I'm particularly thinking about the book we also have in the academy, the Essential Developer book. It has a lot of insights and tips on how to organize yourself as a leader. So what's expected of a leader? Because the challenge I faced, and many people that got into leadership positions as well, was nobody told you exactly what they expect from you. So you say,
yeah,
starting today, Mo, you are the lead of this team. Wow, excellent. What do I do? Like,
yeah, exactly.
should I have regular meetings with everyone in the team? Should I don't know, should I do peer review? Should I do code review? Should I write code or not? And all these things, like, you have no idea how to do them, because they don't tell you.
Yeah,
Like, the
yeah,
company usually doesn't tell you. They just tell you
yeah,
like you're in charge, and
yeah,
whatever
exactly,
that means. So
exactly.
it's kind of difficult to, but with the program, and with the book and all the other resources, there's a more clear path on especially what skills you need, how to get them, things like that. And of course, it's a journey, but it's worth it. So, and I would also mention that maybe it takes, so maybe some people are not perfect fit for leadership position, and you explore that on your own. It's just depends a lot on the personality. So for instance, if you have charisma, it's a lot easier to get along with people too, so they respect you really quickly, and you get authority. Otherwise you might not. So it's a more complicated game than just being technically sound, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Being leadership, it means you have to have a lot of skills. Yeah, and good to mention about the book. Yeah, because I remember when I started reading about the book is not technical. It's more like a business view. So
Yeah.
you get a business view of how the business working. So yeah, as a leader, you should not also cover like technical part and being more technical with your team. You should also have a business view of the whole business and how is it working, because you are like in leading position. It's not about like
Yeah.
just delegating tasks to developer
Yeah.
and mentoring them or
Exactly.
just very yeah.
Exactly. And the impact is huge, because if you can make this shift and understand, okay, I want to refactor this view controller because, I don't know, it's hard to manage, let's say, right? But how does the business view this? How can I refactor in such a way that they also benefit, that
Yeah,
everybody benefits?
exactly.
It's not just like I don't like this code, let me change it. Like I think a lot of
Yeah,
developers think like that, and
yeah,
uh,
exactly, exactly.
business people would just say, "Why? You just wrote it, like, or
Yeah,
why isn't it good?" Huh?
yeah,
So unless
exactly.
you can articulate, you can explain why are you doing certain things, how you plan to do it, what metrics you use, right, in the team to
Yeah,
measure
yeah,
performance, to measure whatever you measure. I think just speaking that, I think there's a chapter
yeah,
about it, just speaking the same language with
yeah,
those
exactly.
decision makers, with those stakeholders,
Yeah,
brings so much cohesion in the team. So you're no longer feeling like we're developers and whatever, we don't care about anyone else, we just want to do our code. It's when when you get past that, there's a whole world that opens up to you, and I'm glad you also noticed that as well.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Because for every, for example, changes in the code, for example, as you mentioned, you want to refactor something. So for technical people, it's obvious or and it's clear why you want to do this. But for business people, you have to bring the value. What's the, for example, the business value of changing that?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
as a leader, you should have that knowledge to bring them and to explain them and to also differentiate between those, for example, refactoring or changes. Maybe some changes are doesn't bring any value to the business. So why do you care spending time on it?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And you even start to think about those priorities. So, okay, I want to do 5 refactorings. Which ones will improve the business the most, right? Which one will allow us to move faster to whatever? So it might be the one that you want to do least, and you want to do other more shiny things. But again, thinking from the business perspective as well just gives you like that extra edge that not a lot of people have. So when you have that, you stand out immediately. I think in many companies, you just like
yeah,
everybody
yeah,
wants to work with you because you understand.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Right. So
Exactly, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
So awesome.
yeah. I just remembered something else as you were talking. I just remembered that one of the major things that you need to know, and I learned it through the academy, is the drawing the diagram of, for example, dependencies or architecture of the app. Because if you are working, for example, in big teams and you want to do some changes, it's not like just bringing code to the team and the whole team knows that what's the impact or what's the changes. Drawing the diagram may help every single person in the team, not only, for example, the developer, but all the business owners, to understand what are you going to change and how would be the impact. So I remember before the academy, I didn't know about the diagrams and I didn't use it at all. And it was always hard for me to, for example, explain
Explain.
what's this change and how to, for example, impact other, I don't know, other areas of the project, other modules
Yeah.
or things. But then I learned this skill of drawing diagrams and it helped me a lot. And it was like opening new doors for me. And it
Yeah.
was really amazing and it helped me a lot in, especially in big teams, for example, teams of, just imagine you have 5 or 10 other developers in your team and you want to explain something and it's really helpful.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I have, if I can draw like a parallel here, I have huge respect for writers that can write concise messages. So
Yeah.
they say the same thing, but instead of using 50 words, they use 10. Like, and it
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
sticks with you. And
Yeah.
it's the same with code. Like, if you,
Yeah.
instead of just talking for 15 minutes, you can show a picture, like,
Yeah.
this is before, this is what I'm proposing, and then you can
Yeah.
just shut up and everybody's
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that
Exactly.
makes sense, right? That's
Yeah.
why the saying, right, a picture is worth
Yeah.
1,000 words, is because
Yeah.
when you see the
Exactly.
pictures, it's a lot easier to process. We're more
Yeah.
visual than we are lingual, right? So it's a lot easier
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
understand that. And yeah, it's a great tool for
Yeah.
communicating uh, whatever message you want. And especially, I
Yeah.
like the impact because people that don't draw diagrams, they don't know how the code looks, right? What are the dependencies? What are the
Exactly.
components?
Exactly.
And when you just have to draw the first diagram, and it's like, oh wow, that's our app. Does it have this many arrows? And like, yeah, okay,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Now I'm with you. Now tell me what you
Yeah.
want to change. So it's a lot
Yeah.
easier, like we said. It's a great
It
tool.
is. Yeah, it is. It is
But
indeed.
with writing, it's the same. Like you just
Yeah.
have. I think once you become more senior, you're able to simplify things more. You're able to just say the precise words, draw the precise diagram, just be like very clear. I think that's one thing you notice on whenever Caio and Mike do uh, mentoring sessions and lectures is like very, very clear. Like they leave all the extra details outside. Now we're focusing on this, like the relationship between this abstraction and the concrete implementation, like just like fully focusing there. And it's an awesome skill to have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. It is indeed.
Okay, so yeah, I want to get back to that time you mentioned when you were still in Iran, found about the program, and you mentioned how you found about it through the iOS developers community there, which apparently is pretty active as you guys talk about
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
the iOS Release Sessions program and other hot topics. And you mentioned some of the struggles you had back then, but let's like I'm sometimes trying to be organized and let's like have a
Yeah.
clear
Yeah.
list of items. So can we circle back and maybe list some of the things you like? What were the main struggles you had back then? Can you share that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so one of the major things was the lack of testing. For example, I wasn't able to test my code and I wasn't able to assure the functionality of my code because it didn't have any tests because I didn't know how to test my code because I just knew that, for example, I wrote something. For example, I wrote a network things, and if I wanted to test it, I just run the network and see if I can receive the data. But it's not the correct way of testing it. But in the academy, I learned how to do testing with the TDD. The other thing was lack of knowledge, especially in software principles, design patterns, architectures, because this is very important because in a small project you may just have a very simple view and with few buttons with few functionalities, but in big projects it's very important to know all these design patterns and software principles because if you don't know how to write code scalable, it will get you stuck in the code because, for example, if you want to scale the app, then that's the time that you get stuck in it because you cannot scale the app because your code is very messy, it's very complex, and you didn't follow any, for example, architecture on your app, on your project. So it's really important. The other thing was, for example, as I mentioned, the design pattern. So if you want to bring a solution for a problem, if you know the design patterns, it will help you a lot to achieve it because these design patterns have been, for example, created with software engineers and software developers. So they have this mindset of these design patterns, and it will help you achieve your problems in your daily routines of your work. So it's also very important because I didn't know about them. Didn't have any like clear view of how do they will help me with my code or with my project or with my knowledge with being software engineer. And also, I mentioned the lack of getting enough salary for that. So that was also something that I was getting annoyed with because I was working hard, but I was not getting paid enough. But all of this, I remember, has been covered in the academy because through the academy, during all those modules, I have learned about design patterns. I have learned about the different architectures. I have learned about the software principles that you can have in your project, and it was very interesting that there is like not a theoretical things that you can just only read about software principles, for example, but also a practical thing that you can see how these software principles have been applied to a project. And as I remember in the crash course, for example, how they make a very messy project to become more clear, more modular, and also more testable. I remember the test coverage of Caio and Mike was almost more than 90, 95%. And it's really amazing because if you have reliable tests, then you can easily make refactoring and make changes because you have reliable tests and you are sure about, for example, the quality of your code. And it's really important to deliver like these functional codes to the production.
Right. Yeah, I fully agree. Like especially like the last part about just tests being your safety net to make continuous improvements to the code base. And I find myself many times in a position where I had ideas on how to improve the code, but I was just like, no, no, no. If I change this, it's gonna break. It's like I don't want this. So forget about it. It's working. Leave it as it is. And just because I had no backup, right? When you're
Yeah,
into a
yeah,
fully
yeah,
tested code, which we know how it is, it's much more enticing. Like everybody wants to make
yeah,
improvements. Like let's rename this, refactor that, extract the function here, extract the class
yeah,
there. It's cost like whatever. Any
yeah,
change you want to make, the test should be your safety net, and
yeah,
it's a
exactly,
lot it's a lot
exactly.
easier. But yeah,
Yeah,
just to summarize, so you mentioned a few things which I I think I encountered every one of them during my career. So you started with just having the lack of the fundamentals knowledge, right? So
yeah, yeah,
principles,
yeah,
architecture, implications of different architecture decisions, um, techniques, even simple stuff like the solid principles, which a lot of developers, if you
yeah,
ask them
yeah,
about solid principles, they know like, yeah, so a single
yeah,
responsibility principle does this, and like interface
yeah,
segregation is like, but they lack the understanding of, for instance, why it's important to
yeah.
use it, what happens when you don't use it,
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
happens when you don't follow it, and things like that, and they just cannot explain this. So it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a theoretical concept, but they cannot put it in practice, right? So if you
yeah,
show them a
yeah,
class, like they're still like, yeah, singleton, just let's use a singleton everywhere, it's good. But and they say, what about the solid principles? And
yeah, yeah,
it's so I think one of the difficulties is matching this theoretical knowledge to practical aspects in your project. So it's like on this class, how can I apply solid principles on my view controller? Okay, let's and I think that's where the program is super useful, is just showing this combination, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And let me add something also to that. I remember the first time that I saw the snapshot testing in the academy. I was shocked. How can we test UI? Is it even possible to test the UI and to be sure about it? And I was so fascinated about the snapshot testing
Yeah,
in the academy that Caio and Mark told me, and it was amazing.
it's
It's
pretty
like
neat.
next level things. It is.
Yeah.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, so there are techniques which we have, right? So for testing, there's a bunch of strategies we can use, and depending on the project, on the setup, on different things, you can choose to use this one, this one. Of course, they all rely on unit tests at the back end, but
Yeah. Yeah.
at the core. But there are other techniques like snapshot testing, as you mentioned. But also there are cases where UI tests are more applicable. There are
Yeah.
like
Exactly.
many. These are all tools in the toolbox. So
Yeah.
depending on the scenario, you choose the one you
Yeah.
need.
That is correct.
So yeah, but like again, summarizing, I would say like we started with the lack of fundamental knowledge, and that bled into not being able to have scalable code. And people might wonder, but what is scalable code? Because we throw this term a lot. It means like I have a small feature today, and tomorrow I get a requirement to change that feature in ways which I never expected, and I can still do it. Like that's scalability.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Or the lack of scalability is when I say no, I need to rewrite this. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Like for
Yeah.
instance, you use the table view to create a horizontal list, and now the designer says no, it needs to be vertical, or the other way around. It's like, oh, I can't do it, so I need to rewrite, right? So
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
That's what's lacking, and usually scalability is related to all these principles and techniques we
Yeah,
mentioned.
yeah, yeah,
Testing, you mentioned testing as well, which is another big topic. I think it's kind of the cherry on top of the cake. So all the other principles, techniques lead to testing. So testing requires every one of them. You can do testing if you don't follow solid principles. You can do testing if you don't have a modular code base. And this everything is connected, right? But testing is like on top. And once you have testing properly set, then there's just a lot you can do. So yeah, I totally relate. Like I had the same struggles. I came to the academy and went through the program before I became an instructor. So I totally understand your position.
yeah.
Okay, and then you came to the moment where you moved to the Netherlands and decided to
Mhm.
join. So, how was that? Did you ask your company for support on joining the program, or did you just decide to pay on your own? Did you have second thoughts, things like that? How was it?
Yeah, yeah. So I remember I talked with my manager at the time, and I told him that, hey, there's this academy. I think I need to enroll it and take the courses. And he explored all the options, but unfortunately at that time there wasn't any budget available for me. So I decided to take the course on my own because I really felt like I really need these courses to take. So what I did that I start as my own money and enroll in the academy. One of the very interesting things in the academy is this built-in system that and also the Slack community that we have. So not only you have all those, for example, the videos and the things, but also you have a lot of people that, for example, have already passed maybe half of the academy or maybe they graduated, and they share the knowledge and they always, for example, ask questions, ask about their daily, for example, problems. There's always someone who came up with some ideas and they shared their ideas, and it's really good. So yeah, but getting back to the story, so what I did was that I started enrolled in the academy. I think it was maybe not first but second or third month that I landed in the Netherlands. And I take the courses slowly because I also needed to work at the company and to settle down everything's new area, new country. So
Yeah,
for
yeah,
me, it was not that fast. It was slow, but but the effect of it was not slow. The effect was very fast because the first module was about the networking. As I remember when I started watching it, and it's like opening a lot of new doors for me because I started to understanding how to, for example, write scalable code, how to understand the code, or how to, for example, test the code, and how to, for example, came up with solution for modular design and this kind of thing. And it was very amazing. So what I did was that I slowly start to integrate the things that I have learned into my work, and I noticed that people are noticing about my work because 6 months later, I was assigned on another project in the company to be working on like some internal SDK that we have. So because I knew for working on the SDK, I had to like become very successful or become very knowledgeable because at the beginning I wasn't working in the project and only, for example, leads or very black belt one or were
right.
working on it. But then my manager asked me that, hey, we want you to work on it because we have seen you have progress and you have changed a lot. So it was very interesting for me. But one of the like big impact that it had was that because I was in the same company, I was getting paid, but I thought that it's not even enough comparing to the knowledge that I have and comparing to the skills or comparing to other developers in the market. So what I did was that I started looking for another job, but I was still in the middle of the academy. I haven't finished it. So I noticed that I can now apply for senior position, and I can even proceed to the interviews and to the technical part, but there's still something missing about the seniority. For example, when you apply for a senior position, you may go to different rounds of interviews for like they want to see how senior you are. So I noticed that my code is now good, but when my knowledge and my seniority is not reached to a level that I try to maybe apply for a senior position. So I got back to the academy, and I got all the courses and going through the courses and to the academy. And I remember after I finished it, like in 8 or 9 months, I started applying for a job, and very easily I was able to land a new job because I always was looking for big companies because most of my career I was working in small or medium-sized companies. So I didn't know, for example, how big companies are working, or for example, if you have a project at that, I don't know, 10, 50 or 100 developers are working on it, how do they manage all this workflow? Because they were all, mostly me and one or two other developers. So it's very different. How do they manage the work? How do they work everything? So I was looking for big tech companies. I was looking for like maybe, for example, I don't know, Apple, Google, Booking.com, Facebook, this kind of companies that are very big. So I started applying for them, and finally, maybe after one or two interviews, I got landed to this job that I have, and I'm really happy with it because I can now use all the knowledge that I have learned through the academy inside in this work. Also because I have now the seniority of it, so I can, for example, came up with a lot of different ideas, a lot of different solutions for every situation that or every problem that we face. And it really changed me because if I compare myself from myself 2 years ago, I can see a totally different person, a totally different developer with more knowledge, with more practice, with more skills that I can handle everything. But before that, I was always struggling with anything, like with
Yeah,
like as I mentioned, knowledge or principles. But now I have all the knowledge, and I have all the practices and the skills, and I can easily apply them to my daily work, and it's really interesting for me. It's really helpful, and also because I am in a senior position, I get paid better, more compensation, better salary. So all these things work ends up with better life. So yeah, I can say,
it pays off, right?
yeah, it pays off everything. Yeah,
Yeah, it's awesome. So honest congratulations here because I know how
thanks.
hard it must have been. And what I want to stress about your story is you discovered the content in the academy and said, okay, this is for me, it's going to take my career to the next level. Then started doing the lectures, and at some point during the middle of the program, you said you already saw some improvements and you were looking for this new position, right?
Yeah,
And you still saw some issues in the interview, right? And you said like there's more, and then got back to the program, pushed again, and through it and finished it. And I want to stress this enough because I see that case happening where sometimes students just are amazed by their transformation in the beginning. Like you said, you start with the first module and you immediately see so many things, and it's like, okay, now I conquered it, like I know everything, and you don't have the discipline to go through all the modules, to everything, and then again and then again. So you don't get all the value. And
yeah,
sometimes if there's a discontinuity there, like you mentioned, people are going to notice that in interviews, and sometimes
yeah,
they're
yeah,
going to reject you. So the other thing is, if you start something, started the program, like you went full steam on, and until you didn't
yeah,
finish it, you didn't stop, and I like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I think there's another issue which some people struggle with is just having discipline to finish something that takes more than a week or something like that, right?
yeah,
To
yeah,
just
exactly,
like, okay, I'm
exactly.
enrolled, I need to finish it, so I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna find the time. I'm gonna whatever, like life goes in the way, throws stuff at you, and sometimes you feel like, okay, I don't have the time, but you go back. And um, I really like this, so I really like respect you for doing that and for going back and like taking it even more seriously, and just okay, I gotta finish this to be able to get the full benefits. And uh, I think it just speaks for itself, right? When you are
Yeah,
on the other side and say, yeah, it was worth it, right?
yeah,
every
yeah,
every
yeah.
hour. And oh, awesome.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. One of the things that I was tackling through the interviews was that, for example, when I was in an interview and I was rejected when I was still in the middle of the academy, I was noticing that, hey, I've learned this through the academy, but I didn't, for example, was able to completely present it. So I got back to for example, to the course again, and I watched it again and again until I, for example, find what's my loopholes, what's that I'm missing in this. And I remember some of the courses I have watched more than maybe 4 or 5 times to like maybe fully understand what's going on, especially those last 4 ones. I don't remember what was that about for the last challenge. And I remember I watched it like maybe 5 times even because it was like full journey from something to another. And it was very interesting that you go to interview, you get rejected, for example, because of the some of the knowledge that because I always ask for a feedback. Why did I get rejected? And I was covering all those lack of knowledge because, for example, they say that hey, you lack knowledge of, for example, maybe, for example, this topic. And I was looking for it in the academy, and I was always there is a topic for the things that you are looking for. And I was learning, oh, that this is something, this is the thing that I'm missing. And it was really nice that you know that there's something missing and then you finally found out about it. It's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, it is, but it requires like an analytical process
Yeah,
where you
yeah,
go to the interview, get the
yeah,
rejection, and look past the egotistic
yeah,
idea
yeah,
that yeah, they rejected me. It's like, no, 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 why did they reject me? So let me ask for
yeah,
feedback.
yeah,
And
yeah,
what's the feedback? Well, you like this. Let's go back to the
yeah,
knowledge base and learn that better. So I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that's the key to success here, is just accepting rejection sometimes and just learning from every one of them if possible. Sometimes you can't
yeah,
because it also happens randomly if they just don't
mhm,
like you for some reason, like whatever, it
yeah, yeah,
happens.
yeah,
But most of the time they're open people and they'll say like, yeah, I think you missed this, you missed that, or you yeah. So excellent. I think this is very valuable.
yeah, yeah, it is. It is.
Okay, and you mentioned like needing like 9 months or something like that. You said to go through the lectures, which is decent, especially having a full time job and
Yeah,
accommodating to a new place, to a new
yeah,
country, new
yeah,
culture.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it really depends on, for example, your day-to-day routine. You can finish the academy in 3 months or 6 months, but for me it took 9 months. But it was also fine because I remember when I started the academy, the first day, I promised myself that I'm gonna finish this course and in 1 year, I'm gonna change my work and I get hired to a bigger company with like higher salary. And very magically, it happened exactly at
exactly like that.
in 1 year. Yeah, so I finished academy in I think 8 or 9 months, and then I started like wrapping up all my knowledge and applying for a job. And exactly in 1 year, I got a better job. And it was really impressive for me when I got back to that time and I noticed that, hey, I set this goal for myself and I kept myself dedicated to like to go to the academy because at the beginning of the academy, there's like this introduction that Caio and Mike introduce everyone. And they also mentioned that there are some people that they are not able to finish this. Maybe they get, I don't know, but for whatever reason, they are not able to finish this academy at all. So for me, I set this goal for myself, and I try to keep myself motivated about all the things, and I try to keep on track, doing and taking all the courses, and I'm really glad that I did, because I
Yeah.
now finally see the result of it.
Yeah, it's great, and it's exactly like you said it. So some people just have issues with like I said, consistency with
Yeah, yeah,
aiming for something longer than a few weeks. It's the same with work. Like uh, we're just not used to being consistent, to allocating
hmm,
that space, that time for an activity. And of course,
yeah,
you everybody has like issues and problems, and
yeah,
you can find all the excuses why you didn't finish the program, why you had no time to work out and all that.
yeah,
But in the end, it doesn't matter. What matters is if you had the responsibility to say, I'm gonna, and I really like your how
yeah,
you put this, like I have 1 year, I'm gonna do this, and you did it like that. That's powerful, because then you
exactly.
say, oh, interesting, that one worked. So next time you find yourself in a similar position, it's like, I know what to do. So I'll just set my goal and work towards
Yeah.
it, and hopefully it will get me there. So it's a skill. It's a skill just to have the discipline to do something
Yeah, it is. It is. Exactly.
cool. So now looking back, and you got these amazing results. I think just transforming how you see programming, getting to the level, to the position level you wanted to in a company, in a big company as you wanted to. So after
Hmm.
working with small companies for a long time, it was probably natural. Like I think everybody is curious, like how do these companies work? And I'd love to be a part of that. Sometimes it doesn't work out, so you go there and it's like no, no, no. But you still deserve the chance to do it. So you've done that as well. You got like a big payment increase even after moving to the Netherlands. So that shows that
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
multiple levels to unlock every time.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So now I'm just curious about if you ponder about the impact the program had on you. What
Mm.
would you say are the main takeaways, like things that are stuck with you and are just different now that you went through the program for you?
Yeah. So joining the program, I can say, was like a turning point in my career, because I gained like the necessary skills and knowledge to address all my struggles. I also learned how to, for example, develop testable codes with like TDD. Also learning about various software principles, design patterns, architectures, and in addition to all of those, it's also helped me to get better job with higher salary. Because as you mentioned, even for example, after I moved from Iran to Netherlands, I still was looking for improving myself and getting better salary. So as you mentioned, there's also level. So even if you are here, it's not like the end goal. You can also improve yourself daily and become like a senior developer, and then become lead engineer, and then just going to progressing through this ladder of improvement. So for me, when I joined the program, I was then considering myself like a meteor kind of developer. Now I started learning all of these things, and then when I graduated, as you mentioned, I got a very well paid job with like 30% higher salary comparing to the last position that I was working. And also, I got all these skills and things. So I can also now think about what's my next level, what's my next goal that I want to improve myself. So I now know about the technical skills. Now I need to, for example, improve some of my leadership skills by, for example, reading the book, and then going to getting even higher salaries, or become lead engineer, or become more of that. Yeah, yeah. There's always
I
room for improvement.
Totally, totally. And I leave this open question for you, and I also think about this to about myself. How far can I go? Like, what's the limit? And again, we don't compare ourselves to others.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
others were
yeah,
more
yeah.
fortunate, but how far can I go? How far can you go? Like,
Yeah.
what's the furthest we can?
I think there is no limit actually, because technology is improving very fast and new technologies and new frameworks are coming. I remember I was a couple of years back, I was also working with a project with AR and VR in iOS development. It was like a very simple project for high school kids. But now with the introduction of Apple headset, now I can see that, hey, if I want to, for example, get back in that area, that now there's a new area, there's new technologies that come in, so I can switch to that area and become like a AR VR developer. Or no, if you want to, for example, switch to another field or to doing something else. So I believe that there's no limit for improvement,
Right.
unless you decide that, hey, for me it's the end of it. Let's just stop here and park it here.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, there's always new challenges you can put in front of
Yeah,
yourself. And
yeah,
um,
exactly.
I think one important part which we have access to in the academy is those transferable skills. So even if you move
Yeah,
to
yeah,
AR, VR, or Android development or web or whatever, like you can still apply most of the things you learn. So you still want to test your
exactly,
code, you still want to use solid principles and separate concerns and build a modular code. Like those things stick with you no matter where you go. I even find myself when writing bash scripts applying these things, right? Or any kind of script on that note. So I think about composability and separation, and it's something that once you learn, there you have that thought process for I think most of your career, unless you
yeah,
unlearn it,
exactly.
right? So
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking with myself that when I learned about all these things in the academy, I had this thing with myself that as you mentioned about testing, for me TDD is not like a technique. For me TDD, or test driven development, is like a mindset, because you learn to start with testing. So it's like a huge different mindset, that you don't start with like developing something from scratch. You start from testing it, and it's totally different from the way that you normally code. And I I had a thing in myself that says that TDD is like a mindset, not even a
yeah,
technique.
I agree. I agree, and
Yeah,
it's a totally different mindset. It
yeah,
leads to
yeah,
different results, and I so much enjoy it. Um, it's just a different thought process, as you said,
yeah,
and especially when like I mean, yeah, it's nice to apply it when you're building new features, but I especially like it when there's a bug or a crash or something like that, and it's like, no, 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 let's write the test to prove it first, and then we can fix it. So then we're sure it never comes back again. So that's to me that's just amazing to be able to do.
exactly,
And
exactly. And as you mentioned, this mindset is not something that you can only use, for example, in iOS. So
yeah,
you can move it or transform it into other areas. And if you have this mindset, then you can apply it in everywhere, in every platform, in every sector that you are moving to. And it's
that's
really,
it.
really amazing. Yeah.
That's it. Awesome. So since we're at this part where we contemplate about the things we learned, so what advice would you give somebody, maybe in a similar position, that mm, want to transform their career and maybe they have like a geographical limitation like you had, or maybe they don't? So what would you say is instrumental to being able to access these senior level positions in development?
So for becoming a senior developer, you don't only need to know about, for example, Swift or the programming language, but also you need to know about other tools, development tools, about the software principles, about, for example, these kind of things. So let me give an example. For example, if there's someone that who thinks that he's or she's a senior, but is lacking something, or thinks something is missing, I would recommend watching the crash courses of the academy. So if you watch the crash course and you see, because the crash course are obviously free, so if you watch it and you find out that this is something that you really need, or this is something that is very interesting for you, then you probably need to take the courses of the academy, because in the academy they cover a lot much more than the crash courses, and it gives you a lot more information, a lot more skills to becoming a real senior developer. So it's not only about writing codes, it's about having all these mindsets and all this knowledge about architecture, about design patterns, software principles, and everything. And being able also
Right.
to apply them to your work. It's not just about knowing them. It's also, you have the skills to be able to apply them in your work very easily without struggling. That
Yeah.
makes you, I think, a senior developer.
Yeah. That's it. I think Kai and Mike stress this enough, like learn, practice, and execute, right?
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
if you don't
Exactly.
practice in a contained environment, and then if you don't execute, which means applying to your real projects, then there's not much learning happening.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
really
yeah,
important to
exactly.
go to these cycles over and over and over. So and you see something doesn't work exactly as you want it, and it was exactly like your case where you say, okay, I need to go back to learning now because
Yeah,
something
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
click.
yeah,
So you
yeah.
repeat the cycle.
Exactly,
Awesome.
exactly.
Awesome.
I can have a joke here. So by watching a video on YouTube about how to swim, you cannot swim. You have to
Exactly.
practice, and you have to
Exactly.
maybe fail in the pool.
Fail in a recoverable way, right?
Yeah. Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So thanks for that. And just in the end, if anyone like a company or an individual wants to reach out to you, how can they find you easily?
I have LinkedIn page that I sometimes share some of the knowledge that I have learned and I've applied into work, or some general topics that they can find me in LinkedIn. Searching my name, they can easily find me. Unfortunately, I haven't had started to have my own blog. It's on my to-do list, but have been there for a long time now. But yeah, I have my LinkedIn, so they can easily contact me there.
Cool. Awesome. So Mo, thanks a lot for coming. This was very interesting to talk to you, to find how you thought and design basically your journey. And I'm sure more things are coming, as you said. Uh, Looking forward to hear your new leadership position being official. So good luck with that. And yeah, again, thank you for being open and talking to me today.
Thank you for having me. It was my honor to be here and sharing my story with other people. It was very nice. Thanks for
Okay,
having me.
thanks. Sure. And see you soon. Like, for you watching, if you want to learn more, just visit us at essentialdeveloper.com. There you can find a bunch of free resources, like Mo said, to improve your iOS dev skills, and also on our social channels, YouTube, Twitter, X, and so on. See you
Yeah.
soon.
Bye.